Good morning. All right, so for those of you who dared to join us this morning, we really appreciate you on this gloomy Saturday day. So we really appreciate you being here today. Today is the Family and Community Engagement Summit. We were fortunate enough to receive a grant from the New York State Education Department under the My Brother's Keeper initiative. And this initiative was launched under President Barack Obama. So we're pleased that we're able to provide this type of programming for our community. We're really here to support our young men of color and also our young women that are here joining us today. This event, we have a keynote speaker that's going to be sharing some words with you in a few minutes. Our superintendent is going to come and welcome you. Our project director is going to say a few words, and then we're going to get started with the program. So let me give you a quick breakdown. So we're going to open up. Everyone should have one of these. We're going to open up with our keynote. We're going to then break. We're going to come back from that break, and then we're going to open up for our student panel discussion. After the student panel discussion, we're going to break for lunch. And after lunch, we're going to go to our breakout sessions, and all of those are listed here. Okay? So at this time, I'm going to bring our project director, Mr. James Thomas, who is going to say some welcome you here, and he's going to introduce our superintendent of schools. Thank you so much for coming.
Once again, good morning, everyone. We've done a summit. We did the summit and symposium in March, and now we're having this summit in May. We really want to expose the young people to things that they don't usually get an opportunity to get exposed to because of the grant here. Just with the Boys and Girls program, one of the upcoming events that we have that's going to close out the year, we're taking a lot of the young men up to a camp in Lake George for 3 days, and they're going to do some team building skills. They're going to do some hiking, canoeing, archery, and just be exposed to nature. So we really want to have you understand that we do a lot of other things besides these summits and symposiums. And we really want to really expose the young people to all that we have to offer and some of the things that they wouldn't usually be exposed to. And we're really excited about what we're doing so far, and we're looking forward to even doing more things next year. So next, I want to introduce our superintendent, Dr. Hazelton. Give her a round of applause, please.
Everyone hear me? Yes, thank you. Welcome to, I believe this is your second big, or third big summit around the My Brother's Keeper grant. Dr. Michelle Rivers, our director of grants, has done a phenomenal job in putting this program together along with our mentors that mentor our male students, black and brown students in this community, in this district. And I am so overwhelmed by the turnout so far. It's still early, and I'm hoping the rain tapers off. Please welcome our esteemed guests. We have our keynote today by Mr. Sergio Argueta from Strong. So thank you, sir. It's always a pleasure. We're also joined this morning by our board trustee, Mrs. Susan Gooding, who is a very strong advocate for children in this community, and we thank you for your efforts. We also have Liz, I forgot the last name, Liz. Oaks from Scholastics. He had a lot of wonderful books. Just share the book with me that Dr. Rivers appointed to have to discuss. And all of our staff, students, parents, and community members, thank you for coming out and supporting this wonderful initiative and supporting our students. And I hope you have a wonderful one today. Dr. Rivers?
So it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. So let me tell you a little bit about this phenomenal man. Mr. Sergio Argueta is among the most influential community activists on Long Island. He is the founder and board chair of Strong Youth, struggling to reunite our new generation, one of the leading gang prevention and intervention agencies in northeastern United States. He earned an associate's degree from Nassau Community College, a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in political science from Hofstra University. He was awarded the Turner Fellowship at Stony Brook University, where he earned a master's degree in social work. Sergio served as the gang specialist for the Nassau County Youth Board and is currently one of the leading experts in the region on gangs and youth violence. Sergio served as the director of the Baccalaureate Social Work Program at Adelphi University for 3 years. He has served as an adjunct criminal justice professor at Nassau Community College and is currently serving as an adjunct professor in the schools of social work at Adelphi University and Millersville University in Pennsylvania. Sergio, you're busy. In 2014, Sergio became a high school social worker at Uniondale High School, where he now serves as the Uniondale High School School Attendance Coordinator. He is involved in various community organizing initiatives, which includes being one of the founders of co-conveners of the Quarter Counts, TCC, which advocates for equity within some of the most marginalized communities in Nassau Community College. So please join me and give Sergio Argueta a big roaring round of applause.
Buenos dias, familia. Good morning. How's everybody? Now, listen, y'all gonna have to do better than that. First off, I want to really thank everybody in the building, but most importantly, I want to thank my young people in the building. I know that some of you were coming for different purposes, and this may not have been the reason why you were here, but truth be told, for me, it's a pleasure to be here. And things always happen for a reason. I'm a firm believer in that. And my life has taught me that lesson, right? So I come to you as a humble servant, and I want to thank your superintendent. I want to thank your board members. I want to thank Dr. Rivers. I want to thank everybody that's here that worked to be a part of this program, right? I'm excited to come and talk to you about the issue of education. Why? Because if you would have asked me when I was your age if I wanted to talk about this topic, the only thing I'd be able to do is tell you how I didn't care for it, right? How I didn't care for education. How I truly didn't understand when I became an adolescent, when I was 14 to about 16, 17 years of age, I was so lost and confused that I really didn't understand the power and value of this thing called an education. But when I get back to the root cause, cuando yo regreso a mi infancia, me pongo a pensar and I start to think, right, about what education meant. When I was younger, I knew. Cuando yo era joven, yo sabía. They taught me right from wrong. I knew what was good. And I have a picture up there, and that beautiful, that beautiful woman right there up at the top center, that's my mother. And that's my family, but my mother was the matriarch in my family, right? Mi mamá fue la que corrió nuestra familia. Yo no me crié con un hombre en la casa. I had no male father figure in my home. And I remember what it was to grow up in that place called Hempstead, right? And when I was young, I got to tell you, one of the most incredible things about growing up in a community like ours, under the conditions that we grew up in, is that you don't understand at that point all these things that are up against us, and you dare to dream and believe whatever it is you want. So when you walked into an elementary school and somebody asked you what you want to be when you grow up, cuando alguien te preguntaba cuando era joven, ¿qué quieres ser cuando seas mayor? You would say some incredible things. You would say some amazing things. Some of you in here said, I want to be president of my country. Even though throughout history there had never been anybody that looked like you that had been president of that country. Some of you would say, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor. You would say some incredible things. Nobody ever says, I want to be a high school dropout. Nobody ever says, I want to fail. I want to be a failure. I don't want to succeed in life. But what happens? You see, what happens is, as we get older, we forget some incredible lessons. En lo que nos ponemos un poco mayor, se nos olvidan los mensajes más importantes que hemos recibido from the people that love us most, the people that really care about you. Now, those people up there, that woman right there, she was my foundation. And then on that right, up at the top right, that's a man named Tyree Curry. And Tyree Curry was the principal of Jackson Annex in Hempstead. And he became the principal of Jackson, Maine, and Hempstead. And he was my principal. And even though I was Latino and he was African American, there was something about the way he spoke. There was something about the way he talked to us. There was something about the way he treated me that it didn't matter that he looked different than me. His words meant something to me. And I remember that he would call Jackson, Maine Elementary School Jackson, Maine University. That other teacher, bottom right, that was my teacher for the 2nd grade, the 3rd grade, the 4th grade, and the 5th grade. She stuck with us. They actually moved her along with us. And you know what happened? You know what that relationship became between me and my mother and all these 3 people? They became a team. African American and Latino saying, you know what, we're in this together. People that love their profession and chose to be educators because they wanted to empower. Because they knew that which I didn't know back then. That the only way you move forward, whether you want to believe it or not, is with this piece of paper that will open doors. And when they don't want to open those doors, but you got that piece of paper, you get to kick down doors. And that's how I was blessed. But you know what happens, man? You know, it used to be, I have conversations with my daughter. She's 9 years old, and she blows my mind with her inquisitiveness, with her righteousness, with her understanding what's right and what's wrong, with her understanding of questioning inequality and questioning certain things and questioning authority even when it's me. I don't really like that part. But when she questions me and she does it with such intelligence and brilliance, I can't help but think how amazing we are when we're young. But somewhere along the lines, as you get older, you're supposed to get brighter. Somewhere along the lines, as you get older, you're supposed to get stronger, not only physically, but mentally. But you know what happens? It's almost like we put it in reverse in certain communities, particularly during adolescence. And I put it in reverse. Around that time, all of a sudden, you know what? Even though I had that core foundation, Brother Franz, even though I had that core foundation, Brother Lou, even though that foundation was there, guess what? I started stumbling. I started falling for the trap. The trap that exists. My clicker's not working. Huh? Yeah, you're going to have to work on that one. So along those lines, when I got to middle school, all of a sudden I graduate 6th grade and I get to that middle school. And you know what happens in middle school? All of a sudden I'm getting to middle school and I start looking at the 7th grader that's 13, 14 years of age. I start looking at the 18-year-old. I start looking at the 18-year-old, right? I start looking at the 18-year-old that's up at the high school, is still a freshman or a sophomore, and is coming down outside to tell us, yo, let's go hang out. Let's go do this, let's go do that. And I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I was a sucker. I'd be lying to you if I didn't tell you I was a fool, because the way they made it looked so beautiful. They said all these wonderful things like, I got your back, I'm this, I'm that. I remember when the old dudes used to come back, the older dudes. They were coming back from their little county time or some of their state time, and you know what used to happen? Oh, we would celebrate them. We thought they were hood stars, hood celebrities, right? Everybody thought it was glamorous, and they would tell us how they were running things there, but they never told us the truth, right? They never told you about how degrading it is, right? All of a sudden, you're the biggest gangster on the block, but the minute them little boys in blue roll around, and they put you in handcuffs, and they take you in front of that judge. All of a sudden, you're in front of that judge. All of a sudden, what about when they pluck you once? What about when you get shot or you get stabbed once, and you lay in there gasping for air? Nobody talked about that. Nobody prepped us for that. But I already knew what I was into. And even though I had that solid foundation, maybe it's just where I'm at. I'm right-clicking. And even though I enjoy, you know what I mean? Even though I kind of knew where it was heading, I played myself in terms of not really understanding the death style I was into. Because you know what? There was something real sobering about the first day that we got hit with the realities of gun violence, and I was 17 years old. My closest friend, who was 19 years old, who was not a part of what we were down with, was standing on that corner, and these guys drove up, and a fight broke out, and one of them pulled out a gun and shot in his direction. His younger brother got shot in his back, and the bullet exited through his chest. He actually survived. Another bullet hit my man Eduardo in the back of the head. September 8th, 1995. I could tell you what it was like to walk into that Mercy Hospital and see my man hooked up to all those machines. I could tell you how painful and scary it was to see that machine breathing life in and out of him and understanding that even though they hadn't declared him gone, when the doctors told us there's no more brain activity, we knew he was leaving. On September 11, 1995, at 19 years of age, he passed away. Within 6 months, a second friend passes away, and a third goes to prison for 12 years of his life. 12 years of his life, involuntary manslaughter, over decisions that I helped make. You see, I promise you, I'm here. You got to know where I come from and what I'm about to really understand where it is that I'm trying to go. I could tell you that when I was 17, 16 years of age, I had some influence, and not because I was the hardest gangster out there, but because there was something about the way you speak, the way you carry yourself, sir. There's something different about you. And my teachers, even the ones I used to say, teachers don't care about me. Nobody cares about me. That was the chip on my shoulder. But if I go back, Dr. Hazel, if I go back, there was always somebody, an adult in the building being like, yo, why you doing that, man? Why you doing, where you think you're going? You don't think I know where you're going? You don't think the story's been written and rewritten and we see it all day, every day in our communities? You think you're doing something new? Nah, man, we've been dealing with this for decades. It was around that time where I decided I needed to wake up. And certain things happened, right? The first was seeing my man Ricky, who went to prison at 22. That's his beautiful daughter. That's his daughter. His girl was pregnant when he got incarcerated. That's the next time this is when he met her. Look at that picture. Oh, man. You got an auditorium this nice and the clicker don't work. Look at that. That's the first time he met his daughter. And I remember that particular day, how excited she was to go see him. And I remember this particular day, that was the next time he saw her on this morning, man. How many of you ever take that trip upstate? How many of you got relatives up there? Don't even raise your hand. Don't even raise your hand. But you know what those trips are like? Yo, when I tell that little girl we're going to go see her father, and this is the time, she had forgotten about her father. Her father sent pictures. Her father would send letters. Her father was always trying to stay in touch, talking on the phone. And that day, it was like 5 in the morning. We were on our way upstate. You got to get up early to go to those trips, right? You got to get up early. Even though you have a car and you're blessed with money for tolls and all that, you got to get up mighty early. And it was a February morning. I remember we went to knock on that door, and that little girl was super excited. I'm going to go see my papi, she tells me. I said, yeah, baby, we're going to go see your papi. She was like, yeah. I'm like, where's papi? And she's like, oh, he's working. I was like, okay, cool. I'm like, yeah, he's really excited to see you. And she brings me into the room, and I see the little drawings that he sent her and those beautiful paintings that he does to pass the time while he's locked away, probably wondering how it is he gave up all that freedom for this, how everything he's losing day in and day out could never, ever be repaid. We get to that jail after driving for 2.5, 3 hours. We stand on that long line where they treat us like we're the convicts, where they treat us like we're the ones that broke laws, when they talk to us like we're less than human beings. And I remember they got to go through all her bags, and they got to go through all these different things, and they treat people. And when I look at that line, you know what? The majority of people on that line, fellas, the majority of people on that line, women. And I start looking, and that's somebody's mother, that's somebody's grandmother, that's somebody's girlfriend, that's somebody's wife, somebody's sister, somebody's aunt. And for a second, I'm like, yo, where the homies at? Where them dudes that are telling you, yo, this is the life, we brothers, we home, we da-da-da. Yo, them clowns ain't there. And I swear to you, put it down in front of everybody, like people I love most in life. You're going to find out who your boys are. You're going to find out who your brothers are. Because life is long, should you be so lucky to live it. But eventually the smoke clears and this stuff cleans up. And I'm going to tell you something. We walked in, and this little girl who couldn't wait to see her father, when he comes out and he goes to grab her, she starts crying and doesn't want to go near him. And he sits down, and he understands that she doesn't know him, and he starts introducing himself to her. Brianna, it's me, it's Papi. You don't remember? We spoke on the phone. Did you get the painting I sent you? You remember that card I sent you for Christmas? You remember I sang to you on the phone? You remember you told me you love pizza, but you hate vegetables. But mommy tells you you got to eat those vegetables to be strong like me. And suddenly this little girl who doesn't want to go near him starts recognizing that voice with that image on those pictures, and she starts warming up to him. And you see this bond just naturally occur. It's like for that particular moment, all of a sudden he starts connecting to her and she to him, and they're a happy family, except guess what? Those hours feel like minutes. Those minutes feel like seconds, and it's time for us to go, and we get up and she says, I don't want to go yet. I want to stay here. I want to stay here. And we say, no, baby, we got to go. And she says, I want to stay here with my Papi. Papi, come home with us. Come home with us, she says. And he says, no, baby, I got to stay here and I got to work. I got to work. And she says, stop working. If not, I want to stay here with you. I don't want to go anywhere. And this little girl clings on to her father, and we got to rip her little arms from off of him. And she's kicking, crying, and screaming. And I lean in and I say goodbye to my brother. And his eyes are bloodshot red and tears start streaming down his face. And you know what he says to me? He says, thank you. Yo, and I got no words for him. I tell him, keep his head up, and we get to that gate, and it opens, and we step through it, and we get to the next gate, and it opens, and it slams shut, and you get to the little light, and you show him your little stamp, and you walk down another set of stairs, show again that stamp, and walk out, get dressed, start driving past high fences with barbed wires and armed guards. And I swear to you, if I think about how some of us go to school and the way we get treated, the comparisons are already well documented and written. What it does to you psychologically, mentally, emotionally to be deprived of your humanity is not by coincidence. And I get on that road and I can't help but I wish I could say I'm sorry to him. Because those are the only words I could come up with. Yo, I'm sorry I wasn't a brave man when I was younger. Even though I was a kid and even though I was misguided, I apologize to my brothers in the heavens every single day. And I talk about them and think about them because they're the only reason that I'm here. They're the only reason that I'm here. They're the only reason I eventually woke up and I decided that I needed to do something different. Scholastic. I decided I wanted to do something different when I got tired of seeing my boys pass away. My boys go to prison, and guess what? I had to cut a lot of them off. And how scary it is, right? How scary. Yo, I talk to some of the hardest kids in the world. They want to change their life. They want to get back on track, and they're not afraid of anybody, Brother Bradley. Yo, these kids are like, I don't care about death. I don't care about jail. I don't care about this, that, and the third. But guess what? When you tell them, yo, you got to man up, take your life back, stop hanging out with the homies, all of a sudden, like, what you mean? But they might come after me. They might get mad. Are you serious, dude? These are your homies, and they're going to get mad because you're trying to get your life on track, then you need to wake up. Because if you're afraid of the people you got beef with and you don't rock with the people you roll with, brother, that should let you know you live in a lonely life. You live in a lonely life. And by the grace of God, I changed mine, man. And I started fighting for my life and the people that meant most to me in life. And before you know it, a journey of starting an organization, listen, we didn't even know where we were going. I was 22 when I started Strong. I'm 40 years now, 40 years old. I turned 40 in March. And I've been blessed with all those academic successes, and I've been blessed with meeting a number of individuals and making an impact and trying to do the little bit that I can to better my community. The little bit that I can to give some people hope where, guess what? It becomes difficult to believe it's even possible. And by the grace of God along that journey, I've been fortunate enough to meet some individuals that have impacted my life and have always guided me down the right direction. And as a result, we do the exact same thing. And now it's 18 years later, and we continue that mission. We continue that work. We continue that struggle. And along the way, there have been some other things I never understood. I went from believing I couldn't graduate high school and I didn't want to graduate high school to becoming a college professor. I became a university administrator. Yo, my freshman year at Hempstead High School, I'm embarrassed to say this, but in a way, I got to be honest, right? I got one French credit freshman year at Hempstead High. And it's not even like I passed the class, yo. Like the French teacher had some issue and they ended up giving that French credit to everybody. I never learned to speak French. All of a sudden, I remember thinking I couldn't graduate high school, but now I'm a university professor at 3 different schools, 3 or 4 universities, different colleges, different schools. And yo, and I swear to you, I'm not even trying to showboat. I'm really not trying to showboat. I'm actually just telling you how much potential exists in this community, because guess what? Regardless of how hard my life was, I'm blessed where at the age of 40, I could tell you life has been amazing. Life has been amazing. And God forbid, while I wouldn't be ready to leave this earth anytime soon, and we're just getting started, man, my legacy is so built in terms of what I built, not only out in the community, because honestly, other people did that. But what I've been able to see in terms of the growth of my 2 beautiful daughters, seeing my mom, being able to put money in my mom's pocket, being able to say, celebrate her 75th year of life, man, those are blessings. But then I think about the other tragedies, man. I think about the world some of y'all live in. See, it's real easy for me to say, oh, you accomplished this, you accomplished that. In fact of the matter is, I'm going to tell you one thing right now. Yo, the life that you leading, even though I don't know you, the life that you leading, even though I don't know you, everybody up in here, my young people, I swear I would not, you know how old people say, oh, if I could go back and do it all over again, if you knew how good you have it, if you knew everything I sacrificed so that you could have blah, 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 blah. You know what? Even with all that, I still wouldn't go back. You want to know why? Because the odds that you up against are difficult ones, man. I'm going to be honest. It would be a lie for me to sit here and stand here and tell you that I had it just as bad as you do, because guess what? That's not the case. But there's some resistance and some strength inside of you that I think, this thing is going back and forth. We bugging out here. I'm going to go up there. Antonio, you know I don't like it up there, right? I could tell you that I would not go back, particularly when you see what's occurring now, when you see the difficulties and how real the assault is, particularly on young brothers, African American and Latino ones. Now, the power of an education is real clear, and people will tell you day in and day out. Fact of the matter is, when I pick up my mother's old W-2 and I see that my old lady used to make $13,000 a year, $13,000 a year. And I ain't going to tell you how much more I make than that, but I'm going to tell you, when you see that the only way I was able to go way past that had to do with the amount of paper I could put in my pocket. Not just money. I'm talking about degrees, getting out there and actually doing it, but it's real difficult for you to actually understand the realities unless you understand what you're going through. And so we understand the dropout rates, right? We understand that there may be some students that you deal with. Right? So my young people, I'm going to ask you, start thinking about the ones you started school with. When did you start losing them? When did you start losing friends as you kept going? Or are you one of the ones that lost friends because you got stuck, but your friends kept going up that ladder? When was it that this stuff occurs, and where is it that it starts? And it's not just about the money, but it's about the quality of life. What kind of life you want to live? Fact of the matter is, we know the stats. We know the facts. We know that you are more likely to go to prison if you don't have that high school degree. We know that one of the ways young people get introduced into the criminal justice system, one of the surest ways, yo, you don't go to school. You want to get into drinking and, self-medicating to escape your reality and make life better. Yo, I guarantee you, we already know. Ain't it interesting how we want control of our lives, and when our parents tell us what to do, when to come home, all that kind of stuff, or our guardians or our loved ones, we got a problem with it. But Brother Herman, when you locked up and they're telling you what to do 24/7, and even when they let you out the cage, you got that bracelet on, or you are on a probation officer, yo, how crazy is it, Mia? When you're on probation and all of a sudden they come in your house whenever they want. All of a sudden, you go before the judge and you standing behind one of these, and that judge is up top, and you look at the courtroom, and everybody in that courtroom, besides the defendants, doesn't look like you. Somewhere along the lines, you think this is by coincidence? No, those stats are real, and you need to start figuring out how you're going to beat and defy those odds. There's all this talk about demographic shifts and how the country's becoming more Latino, this, that, and the third. Yeah, well, guess what? It doesn't help us when we're still not graduating high school. When you look at the percentage, New York State is talking about how proud and happy they are that more New York residents are graduating high school than ever before. But look at that demographic shift. And not only that, this is true because of our sisters more than anything. You remove Latinas and African American sisters from the graduation rates, those numbers plummet. Those numbers plummet significantly. And I'm going to tell you, just not to put the audience on blast, but just look how many of our kids woke up this morning and came to Regents Review. Where are all our brothers? You know, one of the biggest issues and challenges that we're having is that many of us are going to go to college, and it's when we get to college, you're going to start seeing less representation of your culture, of your people, both in front of the classroom and next to you. And you see it by way of administration, all that changes, and guess what? Before you know it, you start thinking that people that look like you are no good, all these messages that you get bombarded with. That's one of the biggest issues. So what that means is we got to do something a little bit different. But you know what I also want you to know? I don't want you to internalize this. I'm going to be honest. I get passionate about talking to my young people only because I think you can still change. I think you are what I need in terms of really changing this world, because if there's one thing that's clear, it's that we have messed up. The adults have messed up. And what happens is, I personally believe that you start internalizing this, thinking that your reality is your fault. You begin to own this and you think there's nothing else that you could do, when in reality there is. You see, we got to talk about, as we want to talk about graduation rates, as educators, right? You know, because I got my master's in social work, and this summer I'm getting that second certification as far as administrator, right? In education. I just passed my exams, and I'm finishing up this 33 credit program, right? Graduate, right? On top of 2 years of law school, didn't graduate from law school, but I'm at 130 plus graduate credits, right? So what I've learned along the way is that if you start believing this is your reality, if you start thinking there's nothing you could escape, there's no way you can escape this, you kind of give up. But when we talk about socioeconomics, when we talk about the advantage, when we talk about privilege, unearned privilege, you see, there's some of us in this room that can say the only reason we're here is because we were raised by a good family, right? We came from good families, some of us. Some of us could say, you know what? I may have not come from a good family, but that school that I went to, they had all the resources in the world, and as a result, I was able to get through that. Some of you will be able to say, oh, you know what? It was that teacher. It was that grandma. It was that neighbor. It was somebody I never even had a conversation with that used to show me through their actions what life could be like. So much of this is predetermined based upon how much money your parents make. And unfortunately, socioeconomic status has a real impact on how well you'll do in school in a number of different ways. I oftentimes think about my own family. My daughter's life is completely different than my life was. My daughter's life compared to my mother's life, way more different. And you could do the same thing. You could think about it, how much has changed. But guess what? Unless we start defying some of these odds with the same resilience our ancestors had to overcome all that adversity, until we do that, nothing changes. So start thinking about it, because even when we graduate, we have challenges. How many of you are going to be the first ones in your family to go to college? Raise your hand. I'm assuming because you got people in college, or are you all telling me you're not going to college? I'm going to ask that question one more time. ¿Cuántos de ustedes serían el primero en su familia de ir al colegio if you so choose to go to college? How about that? How many of you will be the first to go to college in your family? You have family in college already? That's great. You think that's the reason why you're here? See, fact of the matter is, somewhere along the lines, if somebody doesn't show you that route, if somebody doesn't give you that path, if you don't understand that model, you might fall back and fall into that trap that so many others fall into, right? And so many of us were the first to go to college in our families. I know in my family, I was the first to actually graduate college, right? I got successful sisters, but they did it through different means than I actually did. And so as a result, there's no question that if my kids want to go to college, they will go to college. And I say that as an option because at this point, their brilliance might be somewhere else. And I got to be open to that. But somewhere along the lines, we start thinking that these systemic things, that these things that just happen to be, that happen to exist in our countries right now, just happen out of nowhere. Without understanding the history and the legacy of what oppression is, of what marginalization is, of what structures are. And throughout history, there have always been powerful people that have defied that. But it's been against all odds, right? So 50 plus years ago, we desegregated our schools where people of color, quote unquote, were supposed to go to schools with their white neighbors. And when you think about it, even in a place like Roosevelt, guess what? We didn't do too well. And it's the reason why Hempstead looks the way it does, why Uniondale looks the way it does, why Roosevelt looks the way it does, why Newcastle Westbury looks the way it does, why Wyandanch looks the way it does, right? Brentwood, Bayshore, why do these districts look the way they look? When I think about the odds that you're up against and the things that you've seen, I got to tell you, I do get scared. When I think about the world that my daughters are going to come up in, when I think about the fact that, guess what, when we talk about nuclear families, and I'm not going to get into, listen, I'm about love, right? So as long as children have two adults in the house that provide for them, that love them, that care for them, two is always going to be better than one. The more adults we have in our households, the stronger that system is, the better it'll be. When you think about how hard it is in certain communities, when you think about poverty rates, when you think about the fact that, guess what, now if you even have mom and dad, they're both out there working 5, 6, 7 days a week. The fact that the families don't even get together, that's real. Especially living out here on Long Island where, guess what, in this town of Roosevelt, in this town of Uniondale, you got individuals renting apartments for $1,500, $2,000, and it's a 2-bedroom apartment. And they're renting 2, 3 families, and then people want to blame the people that live in those apartments as opposed to the people exploiting the people that live in those apartments, acting as if it's by coincidence. No, it doesn't happen by coincidence, and I'm certainly not going to criminalize my community now when, guess what, how did we make it from the south to the north? What were the complaints they had about our African-American brothers and sisters that were coming up? Oh, there's too many in the house. Oh, they came up with all these laws that relatives couldn't even live with one another. The exact same systems. When we talk about our schools, I got to tell you, man, walking into this building today, I came here a couple of weeks ago. I was here. I've been visiting here 3 or 4 times in the last year. I got to tell you, walking into this building, when I think about the schools that we had to walk in, when I think about the schools that our Roosevelt kids used to walk into 15, 20 years ago, man, listen, drastically different. But what happens when you walk into schools where there is no technology? What happens when you walk into schools where, guess what, you got metal detectors and armed police officers, but we don't have textbooks? What happens when you walk into schools where in the winter they have no heat? And this has been happening for decades, but certain individuals without proper credits and accreditation and certification are making 5, 6 figures. How does that work? How does it work that schools become hiring mills, right? When you think about the biggest businesses in some of these schools, I'm about the business of education, right? So if we want to use that model, we need to empower our kids, right? We got to do that. But when you're about taking from our kids, when you're about stealing from our kids, yeah, no, that's an issue. And so it's a pleasure to walk into a building where you get to sort of see what a school should look like. And it's a pleasure to walk in here and see such young minds ready on a Saturday morning, right? And think about how many kids are in your class. And think about how many actually showed up today. Think about where you could have been. But think about how you actually got here. And then another thing we're dealing with now is this state violence. No, they don't call it state violence. They don't call it state violence, but I'm convinced we got to start thinking differently about how we talk about these issues. You see, I think it's a crime that we invest more money on incarcerating individuals from this community than educating them. I think it's a crime. I think it's a crime when you allow homicide rates to skyrocket in particular pockets. Back in 2007, on the border of where Uniondale and Roosevelt meets, where 13,000 people live, 1% of the population, 13,000 people of Nassau County, 1% of the county population made up 70% of the homicides in Nassau County. And if you threw in the rest of Uniondale, the rest of Roosevelt, Hempstead, Freeport, Newcastle, Westbury, you were touching 90-something% of the homicides. And guess what? Nobody raised an eye. They didn't come in here talking about, let's talk about youth violence. Let's help save our kids. Let's stop guns. Nobody talked about that. How? Why? Yeah, that's state violence. When you allow, for example, the rampage that my brothers and sisters had to live through in the 80s and 90s with this drug war, where they were sentencing individuals to lifetime sentences for nonviolent crimes, stripped them of their humanity, put them in a cage, devastated households, took away fathers, sons, uncles, the backbone of any community. Took them away and warehoused them upstate in different states, made all that money off of them. And now that we got a drug epidemic, we're talking about, oh, we got to give everybody, services. Absolutely. But where was the same type of empathy for that community, right? Where was, just look at it now, listen, another shooting yesterday, right? Another shooting in a school yesterday. 10 kids died. So much news, so much attention, dying at the hands of who? How does this work? Well, guess what? We had about 6, 7, 8 kids die in Brooklyn last week. In one weekend, we have 100 and something kids being shot in Chicago. I was just at a conference where I met a 17-year-old sister that's organizing in Chicago, and you know what she told the room filled with experts? I love the fact that it was a real long, cold winter because I didn't lose as many friends as I regularly do. And you know what my biggest fear? I'm supposed to graduate in June, but the weather's getting warm. And I don't know if I'm going to make it to my first day of college. Yo, that's state violence. That's state violence, what they're doing in terms of criminalizing my young people, what they do about watching us die when we die at the hands of all types of individuals and nobody goes to jail. When you constantly get reminded you're a second-class citizen, when you constantly get reminded that guess what? You don't even get to keep your name, baby. I'm stripping you of a name. You become a case number. Oh, by the way, here's your DIN number. Here's your number, stripping you, treating you like what? Treating you less than. This ain't new. We've been here before. They've been here before. The criminalization now is against what? Against my, listen, I was born in 1978, and how fortunate was I that my mother had me on the right side of that border. Now, why are people coming here from Central America? Why? Because the United States of America went to Central America, Latin America, and destroyed Latin America. And I'm telling you, it was Democrats and Republicans, right? Because when I tell you about how gangster these politicians are, they're the ones I fear the most. And they create all this instability. They go down there and fund both sides of a war. They go down there and train Salvadorian government on how to commit the worst atrocities, human rights violations. And now guess what happens? People want to leave that and escape that. And where do you think they're going? Well, they're coming here. And now we want to close doors. And now we want to criminalize them. Now we want to say, pardon me. Now we want to say that they're the reason we find ourselves in these situations. But no, the struggle is so unique when it comes to being African American and Latino here. Fact of the matter is, if we were going to deport all quote-unquote illegals, it's a very different perspective based upon who you ask. But then you look at history. And then you look at the fact that they've all come here and had to go through the exact same thing. And that they too weren't welcomed in the schools. And then you kind of find out that they too fought leaving persecution, death, poverty, everything that modern day immigrants are dealing with. And you know what? Guess what? They are right. Many of these poor, uneducated, orphaned youth that are here now, they do join gangs, but guess what? When you think about why those poor, uneducated, orphaned Irish youth were joining gangs, it's the exact same reasons. When you think about the skinheads that are being arrested right here on Long Island, When you think about the kids that have firebombed homes where Latinos live in, when you think about the mass shootings, when you think about the violence, when you think about everything they've done, that they try and make us feel like we own, like this is ours. Guess what? The biggest myth they got going is when we start believing this stuff about us, because throughout our history there have been some warriors. Throughout history there have been advocates. Throughout history there have been individuals that said, nah, I'm not falling for it. I'm not believing the lies. I'm not believing that, because that's not my truth. And as a result, we've accomplished some great and amazing things. Now I'll be real with you. The adversity, the challenges, the tribulations, they're very real. No, life is not going to be innocent. Life is not going to be easy. You know how crazy it is? A quick reminder. In 2006, I was the founder of Strong. I had graduated with my master's. I've been on all over, recognized, doing all kinds of work. The authorities knew who I was. People I was doing good stuff, man. You know what they did? I got falsely arrested. And if it wasn't for having an amazing lawyer, and if it wasn't for having the support of my community and the support of my people, I wouldn't be here. Now, if they could take me, someone who had earned all those different things, what do you think they're going to do to somebody like you? But fact of the matter is this. I don't have the information you have. I don't have the supports that you have. I didn't have those supports. But could you imagine what happens if you become a lawyer, if you become a doctor, if you become a judge, if you become a teacher, a social worker, an administrator, an elected official that cares about our communities above ego, right? That if you become an elected official that represents the interest of our people instead of your own personal interests, right? Because I'm going to tell you something. Just look at, there are federal cases now in deliberation, right? A case went to the jury. And what we learned over the last month and a half, 2 months, 9 weeks, I think it was, 10 weeks, that trial. You know what I learned? I learned that elected officials that were running all these government entities that call us criminals, that called us illegals, that did all this grimy stuff, right? They were selling the county, and they were selling the village, and they were selling all these different bodies of government over crumbs, over their own political interests. Familia, you're much too important. Familia, Roosevelt is a prime example of some incredible things that you can do when a community comes together and says enough. And part of that may be having to make some enemies, right, Dr. Hazelton? Some of that may be people not necessarily liking you when you put the interest of children first, right? Madam Trustee, sometimes you got to do things that, your own relatives and your own friends might be telling you, no, it's those people's fault, and it kind of requires you to have a backbone and to be able to say, what are you talking about? Because you see, the same way I go to my home now, and I go to family reunions, and I got people that look just like me, and they're talking bad about the immigrants that are coming here now. I'm like, what are you saying? That internalized hatred and racism, how you buy into the systems and the narratives that they try and create for you. You are the most amazing thing that ever walked this earth. There will never be anybody quite like you. So many of you are confused, willing to risk your life for a street corner you don't ever own, you don't run, you don't live. Because fact of the matter is, if you did, life would be a lot different. No one will ever walk like you, talk like you, act like you, think like you. Ask yourself what you're going to do with the rest of your life. As far as what I see in this room, regardless of your reasons for coming, regardless of whether you got up today and said, I'm going to go take a Regents, regardless of whether you got up today and said, I'm a part of this Boys to Men movement, regardless of whether you're getting paid or not getting paid, regardless of whether it was your counselor that said, no, homie, you're going to have to get up Saturday morning. You know what? You're here. No one could have made you come here if you didn't want to be here. And we all in here now. So at the end of the day, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to me. My daughter's been here this entire time. And I got to tell you, I had a real conversation with her a few months ago. And I had to sit her down because, I've been on television a little bit, and we've been getting a lot of notoriety. We've been talking up a lot. And I had to sit with my daughter, and I had to tell her about my past. Yo, I'm going to tell you, it was humbling and it was embarrassing. Yo, it was hurtful. I had to sit there and talk to my daughter and tell her how embarrassed I am about things I did when I was 15, 16, 17. About what my life has been like. But you know what? It was also the most therapeutic. Because guess what? At the end of the day, we don't pick where we are now. At the end of the day, so much of this was predetermined before we ever started making decisions. But you know what she told me? She said, I love you and I'm proud of you. She asks me all the time why so many of my students die. I buried 3 of my students in the last year and a half. One of my students got shot in the neck at 14. He can't move anything below his neck for the rest of his life. We've been to 40-something wakes strong as a whole, 40-something wakes. 40-something funerals. We work with parents. We know this better than we know the work better than we know our own families, man. It's things like this, Boys to Men, a school district that cares, parents that care, communities that care, that stand up and say, you know what, no matter what, we got this work to do. I'm going to end it like I always do. It's not your community, it's not my community, it's our community. And if we don't take care of it, who will? Thank you.